Over my career, I've had the opportunity to work with all sorts of different businesses from every different market, industry, niche, and anything that you can really think of. And from small mom and pop shops all the way up to mega millionaires and even billionaires for a number of years. And so I've seen what works and what doesn't. And there's a few trends and a few keys and a few indicators that you need to be aware of before you ever even think about starting a business. And that's what I want to share with you here today. So with all that said, let's dive right in with the very first point that you need to be aware of, which is if you want to start a business, you need to know, or at least aim to know very quickly, more than 90% of the other businesses in your industry. I strongly believe that if you're getting into business, if you want to start a business, you should never aim to start a business and just get by. Just survive and just coast along in the average kind of middle position of the industry, because the reality is, if you approach it with that mindset, you will get crushed. Rather, you don't have to aim to be the absolute best business in the industry, though I think that is a worthy and noble goal, but at the very least, you want to aim to be in the top 10% of the other businesses. And to be in the top 10%, you're going to need to know more than 90% of all the other businesses in the industry that you're looking to get into. Now, obviously, some things are going to come with experience, and experience can't be learned, it can't even really be taught, it has to be experienced. But that is no excuse to not do the grunt work, to not put in the grind and the hustle and all those cliched things that everybody talks about and yet are still incredibly important. This is why one of my biggest pet peeves, something that just absolutely irritates me, is when somebody approaches me for business advice or for marketing advice about a new business that they want to start and they've done zero research or next to no research on the business that they're even trying to start. For example, I had someone ask me the other day about marketing strategies for a potential new food truck business that they were thinking of starting. So I asked them, well, what research have they done so far and what kind of books have they read on food trucks and food truck marketing? They said none. I was not impressed. So I went to Amazon and I just scrolled through after typing in food truck business or food truck marketing, and I found well over a dozen books right there, right in front. And so the easiest and by far most accessible thing you could ever do is just go and buy and then read every single one of those books. I mean, we are not talking about a large investment here. Let's say that it's 10 books and they're $20 each. That's $200. That is nothing considering the costs that it's going to take, including the time to get your business up and running. So there is no excuse for not putting in due diligence and really thoroughly understanding and researching your market, your industry, and your business before you ever get rolling. Okay, so let's say that you're the type of person to actually go out there and buy the books and then actually read them, which is an even smaller group of people. So congratulations. What's next? Well, the next step is to be self-aware and to not shy away from the facts and really just to read and accept the statistics, and trust me, they ain't pretty. But here they are. New businesses, especially people with no business experience before, that are starting a new business venture have brutally high failure rates. Now, different statistics and different sources are going to show different numbers, whether it's 6 out of 10 businesses fail or 8 out of 10 businesses fail or most fail in the first year or most fail after 5 years. Regardless, it's more than half, and it's a lot of them. Plus, this doesn't even take into consideration or account all of those businesses that are still technically alive and technically surviving, but breaking even and working their owners right to the bone and killing their soul in the process. You see, most successful entrepreneurs, they succeed after their second venture or third venture or fourth venture or fifth or sixth or so on. It's rare that someone just comes out and knocks it right out of the park the very first time. And if they do, it's definitely a rare case. And if they do, it probably took significantly more time than anybody is telling you. All of these stories about overnight successes and instant millionaires, well, they're just that. They're stories. And of course, those stories do exist, but you should never use the exception to prove the rule. And the rule is that this doesn't happen very often. And for those that it does, it takes a very unique combination of skills and timing and resource utilization and knowing yourself and then working yourself to the bone. The first business I ever tried to launch failed. The second one I ever tried to launch also failed. It wasn't until decades later in my career, after I had worked a corporate job for years, after I'd built up experience and built up a ton of knowledge and a ton of information, that I finally had my first successful business, and I worked very hard to make that thing profitable. The beauty is though, once I learned the secrets and I cracked the code, well, my second business became profitable that much quicker, and my third even quicker than that, and my fourth even quicker than that. So this can be learned, but don't be naive about it and don't think that it's just going to happen without that time, without that sacrifice, and without learning as much as you possibly can. All right, the next thing that I really want to make sure that you understand is that it is going to take some money. Now, I'm not a big fan of the saying that it takes money to make money because, yes, while this is true, it probably takes a whole lot less than you thought. After all, I started my first agency, my first really profitable business, with just a few $100s in investments because I used my old computer, I borrowed a camera to help make videos, and then I really just put in a ton of sweat equity. That said, it still did take some money because the business took months before it was really profitable, and I still needed to eat, and I still needed to buy gas for the car, and needed to pay for heat and electricity and internet. This is why if you have $0, if you've got no money at all, you're gonna wanna get a job first to at least build up a sustainable income so that you can afford to then go out and pursue your business dreams. The same thing goes if you're currently working a 9 to 5 and you don't have any savings saved up just yet. Well, the best advice that I can give you is start saving as much money as you possibly can so that you can make that transition. Also, there's no reason why you couldn't start your new business venture as a bit of a side hustle or a part-time thing, after work or on weekends. After all, one of the biggest mistakes that I see new entrepreneurs and new business owners make is going into a business based solely on their passion rather than on market demand, which is the next point that I want to cover here. When you're deciding and you're choosing a business to go into, you want to make sure that you are not misprioritizing passion over market demand. You see, one of the biggest and most important elements for your success and for your life enjoyment in general is making sure that you're selling something that people actually want. I know, it sounds painfully obvious, yet you'd be amazed at how many times I see people who are following their dreams and following their passions, and they're trying to sell something that nobody wants. Do you know what ends up happening in those situations? Well, in most cases, the person that was originally so passionate about this thing, they go out there and they're doing it all the time, they're making no money, and so their passion starts to fade. And now what they've got is a dwindling passion and still no money. Much better off to rearrange your priorities and focus on serving rather than just selling this passion. You see, when you're just operating from a point of passion, it's almost kind of selfish because you're trying to sell something that people may or may not necessarily need or even want. On the other hand, when you go out there with the intention and with the mindset of trying to serve and of trying to provide as much value as possible, well, then you can start to align with areas that are naturally aligned with your skills and your passions and your interests, and you can sort of see where they match up and where they overlap, and that is the key. Finding an area where the market demand overlaps with an area of interest for you so that you can be engaged and you can do a better job, because obviously you're going to do a better job with something you care about than something you don't. But at the same time, not neglecting the fact that people actually want this thing, which means you're going to be able to sell it, which means you're going to make some money, which means that you've got a viable business, which is the point. All right, the next thing that I want to make sure that you understand, and I alluded to this earlier, but to be successful in business, certainly initially, very much so in those early days, you're going to need to develop unhuman levels of discipline. If your intention is to start a business so that you can work less than your 9 to 5, let me save you from that right now. It ain't gonna happen. Certainly not short term. Building a business is all about short-term pain for long-term gain. Better yet, long-term pain for longer-term gain, because again, it's probably gonna take a little longer than you expected. This is why when you're first getting going, when you're starting your business, you're going to need to develop monk-like discipline. You're gonna have to put in obnoxiously long hours. You're gonna have to work your face off, but that's okay because you're not gonna have to do it forever. Yes, you are gonna have to do it probably for longer than you thought, but eventually there will be that payoff, especially if you build things right and structure it appropriately. Something I mistakenly did not do in those early days of my first businesses, which led me to working 14 to 16-hour days, 7 days a week for years. It's kind of embarrassing to admit because really I overworked, and it didn't need to be so if I was more strategic about how I was allocating my resources, how I was allocating my time, and making sure that I was focused on the most important activities for my business. That said, I might have been able to shave down that 16 or 14 hours to 12, or maybe 10 hours, and maybe instead of working 7 days a week, I could have just worked 6. But still, you need to put in a ton of time and a ton of energy, certainly in those early days. You also need to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable because you're going to have to do a lot of things that are going to put you outside of your comfort zone, taking on risks, taking on challenges, and pushing yourself beyond levels that you were previously capable of. Now, I realize that I've just unloaded a ton of doom and a ton of gloom on you, so I don't want to dissuade you if this is in your heart, if this is in your soul, if it's something you feel you have to do, but I want you to be educated and I don't want you to be naive when you're approaching this venture because it is deadly serious. All right, the next piece of the puzzle is to check out the video I have linked up right here on 7 time wasters for entrepreneurs. These are things you're gonna desperately want to avoid if you want to be successful in business. So check that out now, and I'll see you in the next episode. If you're doing any one of the activities that I'm about to share with you, it is losing you money. And if you're doing more than one of them, or heaven forbid,